Hello everyone, welcome to Zaref Game Dev. In this video, I am going to show you how to make the tic-tac-toe game in Unity. Let's start creating the game. Create a new 2D project and rename it to tic-tac-toe. Let's first rename the scenes first. Rename the scene as main scene. Just set it to main and reload the scene. And set the canvas size to 1080 by 1920. Now let's create the folders first. So we'll have one folder for the prefabs and another folder for the scripts. So the most basic script we are going to use is the game manager script. So let's create it first. Game manager, the name is correct, and let's add the empty game object game manager. Reset its transform and position and add the game manager to it. Now let's create the UI first. Add a UI and let's start with a button. Let's go into the game view so we can see how it looks like and rename it to start. Set the width to 540 and let's set the position to 00 first and center it the top. Rename the text to start. Make it bold. Add the font size to 128. Set the height to 150 and position it at first at 0, 75, negative 75, and position X should be negative 270. Let's create the background to be black. Set the font color to be white. Duplicate the start button and rename it to quit and set the position to positive 270 and rename the text to quit. Now let's add a UI text which we are going to show the game messages. So we'll just rename it to message and let game start. Game start is the starting text, so we'll set the text as game start. Position it at the center, size it to 1000 by 150, make it bold and set the font size to 128. Set the position to 00. Text should be center aligned and change the color to red. Red is good. And in the main camera, set the background color to solid white, so we have something good. And change the width to 560 and again quit to 560 so we can see it as a strip and position the chart at negative 500. Now that was for the UI. So in the game manager, let's add the components first. In the game manager, let's add the functionality for the game start and the game quit button. So let's create a public void game start and in Unity engine we are not using Unity engine dot scene manager, so we have to use it here using Unity engine dot scene management dot scene manager dot load scene, and the scene index is 0 because it has only one scene, and the public void game quit function, and we'll just use application dot quit, and if it is Unity editor, hashtag if Unity _ editor. Then we'll use the command editor, Unity editor dot editor application dot is playing is equals to false. So it will close the Unity play, whatever we call it, the play window, and it will quit the game. And hashtag and if. Let's add the functionality to the two buttons. Let's go to the Unity and add the functionality to the two buttons. So in the start, we'll add on click event listener and add the game manager to it. And in the function, we'll use game start, and on the quit, add the game manager object and game quit. So we'll need to set up the build index. So we need to add the scene. It is already added, so there is nothing to do about it. Let's start playing the game. Start, it restarts the game. Here it is. The game is restarted. We are getting a new, and quit, it quits the game. So first we have created the game start and the game quit, and the game manager is ready. So let's start by creating the board. So add an empty game object and rename it to board. Set the position into 000, and in it we have two things. The first one is the items, which will store all the objects, make it a child of boards, and the next we have the lines. And in the lines we have the 2D game objects. So let's start by creating a template first. In the lines, create a 2D sprite square and rename it to line. Reset all its transform. It's already reset. Set the position to 000, and we cannot see it because the color is white. Make the color to black. Set the X scale to 0.04, Y scale to 4.5, so we can divide it by 3 and position it correctly. And set the board, will not set it now. So this is the first line. We don't need anything else. So let's create a prefab out of it so we can use it again. Now let's add the second line and two more lines. For the last two lines, change the Z rotation to 90. For the first and the second line, we have created the grid, and the height is 4.5. So we need to push it half of that cell length. So the cell length is 1.5, so we'll push it by 0.75. So let's push the x by 0.75 in the x-axis. It is vertical, so we'll push it in the x, and this one by negative 0.75. Similarly for the line 2 and line 3, but we'll push it on the y-axis 0.75, and the line 3 will push it on the negative 0.75 y-axis. So this was the grid, but it is a little bit ahead, so we'll change the board position to 1, so it will push it up. Now in the items we have the square objects, so again we'll create a UI, not UI, 2D object sprite, and rename it to square. Make it a pure black, the size is correct, and rename it to item, and create a prefab out of it. We'll start by editing the prefab, change the alpha to 0, so we'll not see it, but for now we'll set the alpha to 1 so we can see it. So it contains open the prefab, it contains a canvas and it has a text. So we'll first create a text and we'll not rename it to anything. Let's set it to X or O, whatever we like, and size to something like it's 1 unit wide, so we'll make it 16. And we need to first remove the canvas. Instead of screen space overlay, we'll set it to screen space camera, sorry, screen world space, and position X, position Y 0, and width is 1080 by 1920. It's so large. The first width was created in pixels, but this is relative to the parent game object, so it's created in world size. If we set it to 1 and 1, it will be the size of the sprite, and if we set it to 2 and 2, we need to prefab the item. Okay, items and canvas. Let's rename the items to item and override the name. Rename it to item. That was a little bit of problem. Delete it from here. Then we have nothing here. Item canvas. Canvas has a 2 and set the text. Let's change the width and height to 1 comma 1, font size to 16. So set up the canvas text and remove the graphic gray caster. It will set up problems, and dynamic pixels per unit is 100. The text is position. Let's make it a full size. It's at the center and the center instead of something like 10, 1, and change the color to something like pure black or white. Red or green should be good. Make it pure red so we can now see it in the scene. Add the item to the items. So we have an X. Now we need to duplicate it multiple times. Whatever is remaining, let's start in the game view. We have an X. Now let's add a script to the item and we'll call it click. And the click is the main folder. Let's move it to the scripts folder. And now let's start editing the click script. Let's open the click script in Visual Studio and start editing it. In the click script, first we'll have a serialized field and it will be an int for row and col. So we can know whatever position its row and column are, and we'll have one more serialized field and it's a type of text, so we'll set it to using unity engine.ui, so we can add the text to it and we'll call it just text, and it will have a awake method, and in the awake we'll set the has played to false, and has played will just check if the component is already clicked, so we'll add a bool for it. Bool has played, and in awake we'll just set has played is equals to false. Now the text is the text which is attached to that object. That's the X and the O. We are seeing it. And let's add a public void script and it will add the set score. So depending on if it's a player or not a player, it will set the text to X or O, which is a player. X is the player and O is the opponent. So if it is a player, we'll set the text to X. So the text is text. So we'll set text.text is equals to X. Text.text is equals to X. And text.color is equals to the X was red color. So we'll set it as a new color. And it takes an RGB. So red value is 0. Green value is 0 and blue value is 0. Else, if it is not a player, then we'll set the text.text is equals to O, capital O, and text dot color is equals to new color, and set it to red and green. So let's make it green value to 1. And now we'll set has played is equals to true because we already set the store has has played is equals to true. And now we'll create in the game manager script. So when this click function will be called, whenever we click on it, so for click we'll use the raycast, and from the raycast we'll get the component, and we'll check if the component has the click script, and if has click script, then set we'll call the component set store from his player. So in the game manager, let's first add all the functionalities. We'll add first boolean and set it to is player, and one more boolean. We'll call it has game finished. We'll use it afterwards. And let's set an awake method where we'll set is player is equals to true. And serialize field. We'll again add a text. So we'll add using Unity engine.ui. Whenever the text is called, so it will show us whose turn is it, depending on is player or not player. And we'll add a text and we'll just call it message. It is serialized field, so we can assign it from the inspector, and has game finished is equals to false. We'll not add the functionality for has game finished for now, but we'll add it later on. So the checking is going to be in the update function, and what we are going to do is update it. So let's rename it to change text. So because depending on the input, we are going to change text. So when we are going to change the text, whenever the mouse button is called, so when input dot get button down of 0, 0 is the index for the click, and we'll call change text. Now let's start editing the change text. In change text, we are going to get the array and check if the array has a component. So let's start vector3, and we'll get it mouse position in world point. So it is camera dot main dot screen to world point, and we'll call it on input dot mouse position. Now we have in 3D, we need to set it in 2D. Vector2 mouse pose 2D is equals to new vector2, and we'll add mouse pose dot x and mouse pose dot y. Now we have the vector2. We'll add a raycast 2D hit. Name it to hit, and we'll add it to be a physics 2D dot raycast, and for the ray we have from the mouse pose 2D and vector 2.0, because we are just going in the downward direction and we'll just need a point. So if hit not is equals to null, hit not is equals to null, then we'll add some functionality. Error. Okay, hit just gets the game object. Hit dot collider not is equals to null, and this. Okay, let's just first set not equal to null, then we'll add the function. and the function is so if it is not equal to null, so just let's debug.log for now, and we'll call it as the game object name. So hit dot collider dot game object dot name. Let's save it and let's see if it is working. Let's go to Unity. Cannot train dot get button. Okay, it was get mouse button down. That was an error. Get mouse button down. So now the error is fixed in the game manager. We created the input get button down. We just checks if the button is down, but we need to check if the mouse button is down. So now the error should be fixed. Let's start adding the game. We have init objects. Let's click here. It is not working. We need the graphic raycaster. So it was not working because we forgot to add the box collider 2D to the item game object. To check the raycast, we need to have a collider attached to it and set it to be trigger. So whenever we use it, we can set the trigger. And in the scenes, let's create the grid. So the first was the item. It is at 0, 0 position. The second is the item 1. It is at 1.5, and the item 2 both are 1.5. Item 3 will have just a negative expose of 1.5. Item 4 is at correct place. Item 5 positive expose of 1.5, and item 6 7 will need one more item for item 8. We'll duplicate it another time, negative 1.5 and y pose of negative 1.5, and the item 7 just a y pose of negative 1.5, and the item 8 will duplicate it from here and it has a positive position of 1.5. So that's a grid. Let's add play and let's see if it's working. This is the item 1, item 2, item 3, item 4, item 5, item 6, item 7. So we are getting all the game objects, but we do not need to get all the game objects. We need to set the score, and it will set the score depending on if it is player or not. So in hit.collider not is equals to null, and hit.collider dot game object dot get component, and the component is click dot as again forgot to add the Visual Studio, and in the click we need to add the has played to public because we need to check it from here, and dot click dot has played, and if it has played we don't need to do it, but if we don't have played and game is not finished and game has not finished, then we need to do whatever thing we want to do. And what are we going to do is we'll set the score from hit dot collider dot game object dot get component click, and we'll call the set score from there, and for set score we'll just add is player. So depending of the player is not, it will set X or O, and we set it the score. Now when we set the score, we need to update the message if is player else, and is player is equals to not is player. So it changes the turn. Now the first time we are going to call the set score, it is player and it is X turn. So if it is player, then we'll change the message.text is equals to the player has played the turn, so we'll make it at host turn, the opponent's turn, and again message.text, the opponent has played, then X's turn. The functionality is working, nothing is missing. We are changing the player and changing the text, setting the score, and the click. We set the has played is equals to true. So whenever has played is true, has played is false. If has played is equals to true, then it will set it to be false. The set score function will not work and there will be no change in the opponent to player. So let's go to Unity and let's play the game. Was the X a reference exception? Okay, we need to add the text to the game manager. And let's start editing our item. We'll set the background to 0. Did we add the color? Yep, color is also set. The item, let's check the prefab. The item click script is added as played is equals to false. And we need to check for, we don't need to check for now the row and the column. And we'll set the text or text is equals to nothing so we can know. If it is empty, let's play again. All the message.text, realize field and text. The game manager has a problem. X0, 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 and X0. So now we have the scene in which we can play. It will not change. Let's start it again. X, the turn does not change. O, X, O, X, O, and here is X. But the game does not terminate because we have not added the gameplay functionality. And this we are seeing is just the basic view. We have added the text. Whatever the text is was in the awake function, so there will be no error. That was for the click and the game manager script. Now we need to add the functionality to it. So in change text, we'll add another script which will check if the winner is true and we'll call it determine winner, which will name it to be public void. And it will get a row call and a bool is player. Again, I have not added the Visual Studio to it, so I just created determine winner function, and in this function we are going to say if the winner is there or not. And if determined winner, and if it is true, then we'll set the has game finished to true. And here is the has game finished. Has game finished is false, so it is always true, it will not run. So if game has finished, then we'll call this function. So we'll call that function from the click function. And to call it from the click function, we need to set the game manager to a static and refer it from there. So in game manager, let's create a public static game manager instance. And if the game manager is not set, we'll set the instance is equals to this. If instance is equals to null, then instance is equals to this. So we can refer the game manager script from here. We need to set it in the game manager, public static game manager instance. Public static game manager instance, and in the update, we set the game manager to be this, and this is the game manager script. And whenever has played is equals to true, we'll call the game manager dot instance dot determine winner, and we have the is player, but we need to add the row and the call. So that is row, call, and is player. So we'll set the functionality of the determine winner in here when we set the score, and we'll set has played is equals to true. Now in determine winner, it is just called, but we need to update the data. So the data will create shipped public API. Okay, so it's not error. Just we have not used it yet, and the row and column we have not set it up. The serialized field it is also 0. The function is true. Is finished. So we need to set a class and we'll call it a board. Let's start creating the class in Unity. So we just need an empty script called board and open it Visual Studio Code. We don't need any of it. And no. And this is just the public class board. We need to create an enum. So we'll add it public enum, which stores the player state, and we'll call it as call cell. Cell is a good name, and it has just three states. The first is the none, the second is the X, the third is the capital. And depending on the state, we can set the board. So first at the beginning, all the boards are none. Then when we update the state, it will change on X and O depending on whatever it is called. So in class, we'll need a cell array of cells. Now let's first create a constructor for board. And needs to be public because it's a constructor. So in board, we have just cells is equals to new cell array, and it will be 9. Let's call it cell capital naming rule, and cells are new cell of 9. I read only. We don't need it to be read only. Board.cells can be removed as the value assigned to it. Great. We'll read it another time, and we are just initializing it. And let's set everything to none. Print I is equals to 0. I less than cells dot length. I plus plus, and we'll set the cells of I equals to capital cell dot none. So everything is set to none at the beginning, and the function we are going to call is public bool update cell, and it takes integer row column, and a boolean is player. The update cell is done. So what the update cell will do is change the cell. So we'll just get the index first. Index row multiplied by 3 plus column. So that will be the index for now. And the cells at the index is equals to is player. We'll use a ternary expression. Bool player question mark is player. Then we'll set it to cells.x or cells.none. Cells.o. Now we have the cells index. Now we'll return is winner. We are updating the cell. It will pass the row, column, and the player. Let's rename it to is player so we don't get. The is winner function is not created, so let's create the is winner function. Is winner of row, call, and it is player. Bool is player, and will return. How will we check the winner? We'll check if, let's first get the cell from the index. Cell my cell. Cell is equals to is player. Then if it is player, again we updated the cell. Here we'll get the cell. We can get it from the index, but we'll use it. We'll use the bool to determine what. Let's get it from the index so we won't get confused. Need to add this player. We'll just add row and call, and at the row and the column we determine if it is the winner. So the cell is at the row and the column, so it is at cells of row multiplied by 3. That's called because at the index of the row and column. Now we'll return. I'm getting a call, so let's see if it's return. Let's just first return it to false. So what we are going to return in it is if it is a horizontal row. So first we'll add bool is horizontal. Let me call it cancelled is horizontal. So how will we check if it is horizontal? We'll need int row and the cell, we'll just call it cell. Let's first return false, and we'll match the index with the cell. So we need a bool match cell. We'll just call it match, and it will take an integer of index and a cell of, let's just call it cell, and it just returns if cells at index cell set index is equals to cell. So it's, we, instead of using equal to, we are just using a function, and if it is horizontal, in horizontal we need to match all the horizontal cells of the row. So in the row we are going to have row times 3 plus first match cell, and the index is row times 3, and the cell is the cell, and or, not or, we just need and match cell, row multiply by 3 plus 1, and the cell is the cell, and match row multiply by 3 plus 2, and the cell is the cell. Cell, okay, we need a bracket here. So this one's for the horizontal. The first condition is a row multiply by 3. If it is a zeroth row, it will be the 0, 1, and 2. If it is the second row, it will add 4, 5, and 3, 4, and 5. And if it is the third row, it will add bool is vertical, int call, and cell. And in vertical, we have the same type, but instead of row multiply by 3, we'll just add call plus 3, and call plus 6. So column is the first column, and column plus 3 is the same column index in the second row. Match call plus 3 with cell, and match call plus 6 with cell. This is the end, and row and cell determine is winner. So winner will determine if it is horizontal, depending on the row and my cell, or it needs to check any one of the condition. Is vertical, will call my cell, and we'll add one more, and that is the bool is, and what it is, diagonal. And in diagonal we are just going to pass the int index. Let's first return false. So if it does not match, it will return false. So let's add it to it. Or is diagonal, and the index is row multiply by 3 plus call. So that was for if index is equals to 0. If index is 0, then we'll have the, what do you call it, backward slash line, index is equals to 0, or index is equals to 4, or index is equals to 8. Then we'll return match index, and we'll need the cell. So let's pass the my cell, and let's call it cell. We need to map the cell to it. Match 0 with cell, and match 4 with cell, and match 8 with cell. Now where are the errors? 0, 4 and cell. Not an int cell. And if index is equals to 2, 4 or 6, index is equals to 2, 4 or 6, return match 2 with cell, and match 4 with cell, and match 6 with cell. So that was for the diagonal, horizontal or vertical, and it will determine the winner depending on it, and the update cell will update the cell and determine the winner. So that was for the board. Let's create a new board in the game manager, and let's call it board my board, and in the update we'll set my board is equals to new board, and in the determine winner, if my board dot update cell row column and is player is true, so the game has ended. What will you do when the game is ended? We'll just change the text, and first as game finished is equals to true, and message dot text is equals to the player is not changed depending on his player question mark X wins, and the default condition is O win. Nothing else to do. Has game finished? Change text. Let's see how it works. Let's go to the Unity gameplay and check how it works. Let's add, we updated the board, updated the click. Click has the instance. So we need to update the items. 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2, 1, 1, 1, 2, and for the 6, 7, and 8, the row is 2, column is 1, and the column is 2. So let's see how it is working. Are there any errors? X 0 turn, played X, 0 X turn, X 0 X 0. We have not updated the message. as game finished is equals to. Okay, we updated the message, but determine winner. We need to check if the game is finished. So if as game finished, then we'll just return. We'll not update any of the messages. So the game is finished. The thing we edited was before checking if we want to update it or not. If the game has finished, it will not update the text and it will directly create it. So let's review the game. First, we created the UI, the start and the quit button, which has the functionality in the game manager. The game manager has the start and the quit, which the start loads the zeroth scene, which is the main scene, and the quit application quits the game. Then we have the message. Let's change it to a color of blue. It looks good. Blue is good. So we have a combination of red, green, and blue. So the message first we have the game start message. Whenever the game gets updated, we'll get the respective message. The board in the board we have the lines. We created a prefab for the lines and position it correctly. And item we have an item prefab. Let's review the item prefab. The item prefab has a 2D sprite which is a square and we set its alpha to 0. We add a text to it, and in the canvas we set the width and height to 2 and render mode to world space. And we removed the graphic raycaster because we don't need it to interact with the raycast 2D. But we interact with using the box collider 2D, for which we had the problem, and reference it to the text in the script. In the script we just have one function, and that is the set score, which updates the and text of the item depending on the player, and calls the game manager instance update score. And in game manager instance we have a class for the my board which stores all the states and updates the game depending on it. And whenever the game is finished, we have a counter. The counter checks if the game has finished, and it will stop all the functionality, and then we can restart the game again. So let's see. For now we have the game start x 0's turn because we played the x turn. Let's play 0 x turn. Here x 0's turn. Let's play x 0's turn 0, and 0 wins. So the game is finished. It took a lot of time. So if you like the video, do like and subscribe the channel, and suggest it to others.